The debris field smelled like nothing. That was the part nobody warned you about. Space does not smell like burning metal or chemicals or death. It smells like nothing at all, and somehow that is worse than anything else you could imagine. I was 3 hours into my shift when the scanner picked up the anomaly. My name is Mara Voss. I am 34 years old. I have been cataloging wreckage for 8 months, and I have not taken a single day off, and nobody has asked me why. The salvage contract pays enough to keep the rig fueled and my coffee supply stocked. That is all I need. That is all I allow myself to need. The rig is called the Gertrude. She handles like a shopping cart with a broken wheel, and she leaks heat from the starboard coupling every time I push past 60% thrust. I love her in the way you love something ugly that has never let you down. The debris field sits at coordinates that used to mean something, used to mark the edge of humanity's first colonial route. The Odyssey fleet launched from here 5 years ago. 40,000 people, 43 ships. The best thing we had ever built, pointed at a star we had chosen because the light from it looked warm. The Keth reached them 11 minutes after first contact. 11 minutes. I was a junior systems officer on a relay station when it happened. I watched the fleet signatures disappear from the board one by one, then in clusters, then all at once. The last signal we received was not a distress call. It was not a final message. It was an automated status ping from the fleet's navigation computer, still faithfully reporting its position 1.3 seconds before it ceased to exist. The governments of Earth responded the way frightened people always respond when the math is too clean to argue with. They sat down. They signed things. They drew new maps that kept humanity inside a box, and they called the box a containment zone, and they told us it was for our own protection. Nobody shot back. I was not allowed to be angry about that on paper, so I came out here instead, 8 months ago, with my scanner and my log files and my broken-wheeled rig, and I started tagging wreckage for a memorial archive that the government has not officially sanctioned and that nobody has officially asked for. 17,412 pieces cataloged so far. Each one gets a tag. Each tag gets a note. I do not know why I think this matters. I do not examine that too closely. The scanner beeped. I almost ignored it. Scanners beg for attention constantly out here. Micrometeorites, ice fragments, the occasional ghost signal from a dead transponder still running on residual power. You learn to read which beeps mean something and which ones are the field just talking to itself. This beep was different. I leaned forward in the pilot seat. The screen showed a dense object, roughly the size of a large suitcase, tucked inside the collapsed frame of what had been the fleet's forward science vessel. Black, completely non-reflective, no human registry signature. I sat with that for a moment. Non-reflective surfaces that eat scanner light are not standard human engineering. We build things to be found. We paint emergency orange on everything. We put transponders on transponders. We are, as a species, constitutionally afraid of being lost. Whatever this was, it was built by something that had no interest in being found. I suited up. The EVA took 20 minutes. The object was wedged between 2 collapsed support struts, and I had to cut one free before I could get my hands on it. It was heavier than it looked, dense in the way that things are dense when every centimeter of their construction has a purpose. I got it inside. I sealed the airlock. I stood over it on the floor of my cargo bay and looked at it for a long time. Then I ran a passive scan. The object was transmitting. Not loudly, not urgently. A quiet, steady pulse like a heartbeat that did not know the body around it was gone. The signal was structured, layered, data, not noise. It took me 40 minutes to crack the outer encryption layer. I am not a linguist. I am not a cryptographer. I am a systems engineer who has spent 8 months out here alone with nothing but time and stubbornness, and a coffee maker that also works better than expected. The file that opened was a log. The Keth had recorded the destruction of the Odyssey fleet the way a sanitation department records a routine clearance. Column headings, timestamps, Performance metrics. Estimated clearance time, 11.3 minutes. Actual, 11.1 minutes. Efficiency rating, 99.8%. I read that line 3 times. The coffee maker beeped from the galley. I did not get up. The log went on for several more pages. I did not read them. I did not need to. Everything I needed to understand about what humanity was dealing with was already sitting in that one line. We were not an enemy to the Keth. We were not even an obstacle. We were a number in a column, and the column was satisfied, and somewhere in a Keth administrative system, a file had been closed and shelved and forgotten. Efficiency rating, 99.8%. I sat there in the cargo bay of my broken-wheeled rig, in the middle of the debris field that used to be 40,000 people, and I read that number until I could feel it settling into my chest like something cold and permanent. Then I picked up the black box, carried it to the storage locker, and locked it inside. I went back to the pilot seat. I filed the day's catalog entries, 17,431 pieces now. I ate something I cannot remember eating. I slept 4 hours. When I woke up, I already knew I was not going back to the relay station. I had one contact, one person who might know what the box actually contained and what it might mean. I had avoided calling him for 2 years because the last conversation we had ended with both of us saying things we meant but should not have said out loud. I called him anyway. His face appeared on the screen looking exactly the way it always did, like he had not slept in several days and had decided that was fine. His name was Dako Osai. He was the best reverse engineer I had ever met, and he was wanted for questioning by 3 different government agencies for reasons none of those agencies liked to put in writing. "You found something," he said. He did not say hello, he never said hello. "How do you know I found something?" "Because you called me," he said. "What is it?" I held the black box up to the camera. He leaned forward. His eyes changed in the way that only happens when someone sees a thing they have been looking for without knowing they were looking for it. "Where are you?" he said. "Debris field, Sector 7. Do not move, do not scan it again, do not let it touch anything networked." He was already standing, already reaching for something off camera. "I am going to send you a contact. Her name is Priya Anand. She is going to call you in about 10 minutes. Answer it." "Who is she?" "The only person who might be able to read whatever is inside that box." He paused. "Mara." "What?" "Is it transmitting?" I looked at the locker. "Yes," I said. Something moved across his face. Not fear exactly. More like the expression a person makes when a door they thought was locked turns out to have been open the entire time. "Good," he said quietly. "That means there is something in there they wanted to keep." He cut the call. I sat back in the pilot's seat and looked at the debris field through the forward window. 17,000 pieces of what had been the best thing we ever built, floating in silence around me. No urgency, no signal, just wreckage and stars and the quiet pulse of a box that a dead empire had not bothered to retrieve because nobody had ever made them feel they needed to. The screen lit up. Incoming call, unknown number. I answered it. "You have the box," the woman on screen said. She was not asking. "Do not open the inner casing. I will explain why when I get there. Where exactly are you?" I gave her the coordinates. 6 hours, she said. "Keep it locked and keep the rig cold. Cold slows the pulse rate, which slows the data bleed." She looked directly at the camera. "This is real, isn't it?" It was not a question either. "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them, and she looked like a person who has just made a decision she will not take back. 6 hours, she said again, and she was gone. I made fresh coffee. Outside, the debris field floated in perfect silence, and somewhere inside my storage locker, the black box kept its quiet, steady pulse, like a clock that had been counting down to something for 5 years, and had finally found someone to hand the time to. The 6 hours felt like 6 minutes and 6 years at the same time. Priya Anand arrived in a vessel that was technically a licensed academic research shuttle and practically a machine held together by ambition and expired warranty cards. She docked without asking permission, which told me everything I needed to know about her. Daco arrived 40 minutes later, his own ship smelling like burned solder and engine grease, his hands already reaching for tools before the airlock had finished cycling. Neither of them said hello. I put the coffee on. That is my version of a greeting. We spread the black box on the cargo bay floor between us, and Priya crouched over it with a handheld unit. She had clearly built herself from parts that had no business working together. She moved the scanner in slow arcs, not speaking. Daco sat cross-legged 2 feet away and watched her the way a mechanic watches someone else work on an engine he knows better than his own heartbeat. I stood by the coffee maker and waited. "It is a record archive," Priya said finally. "Not a weapon, not a communication relay, a black box the way you said." She looked up at me. "It recorded everything the Keth collected during the clearance operation." She did not say massacre, I noticed that. I did not comment on it. "How deep does the archive go?" Daco asked. "Deep." She went back to the scanner. "Tactical data, weapons frequencies, shield harmonics, engine output signatures." A pause. "Mara, this is their operational file for the engagement. Every system they used logged in real time." The cargo bay was quiet for a moment. "They logged their own weapons frequencies," Daco said. "They log everything. They have been doing this for 4,000 years, and nobody has ever given them a reason to worry about someone reading their files." Priya set the scanner down and looked at both of us. "Their entire military network runs on a unified resonance frequency. Every weapon, every shield, every ship in the Dominion fleet." I heard what she was saying. I heard the shape of it before the words caught up. "One frequency," I said. "One frequency," she said. "They have never had to change it. In 4,000 years of expansion, no species has survived long enough to use a weakness twice." The silence that followed was a particular kind of silence. The kind that happens in the space between a door swinging open and the moment you decide whether to walk through it. Daco picked up the scanner. He turned it over in his hands. He put it back down. "If we had that frequency," he said carefully, "and if someone were to build a system capable of broadcasting it back at a Keth installation at sufficient amplitude." "Every Keth weapon in range would go dark," Priya said. "Not destroyed, deactivated. The signal would tell their own systems to power down, using the exact command structure their network was designed to obey." "We would need a ship," I said. "We would need more than a ship," Daco said. "We would need a weapon delivery system built around the broadcast, a resonance emitter strong enough to reach Keth infrastructure. We would need Keth components to build the emitter because our materials cannot handle the output." He looked at the black box. "And we would need about a year." "We would need a place to build it," Priya said. "I know a place," I said. Both of them looked at me. "There is a decommissioned shipping depot outside Reykjavik. The government stopped paying attention to it after the containment protocols went in. It has 3 large containers, a functional power grid, and it is not on any current survey map." "Iceland," Daco said. "Quiet cold, nobody asking questions." He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then he nodded. "I need to know something first," Priya said. She was looking at me, not Daco. "Why are you doing this? You had a career, a posting. You gave all of that up to come out here alone and catalog debris that nobody asked you to catalog." She waited. "That is not grief. Grief does not look like that, so what is it?" I looked at the storage locker, where the black box had been sitting. "Do you know what the efficiency rating was?" I said. "What?" "The Keth logged an efficiency rating for the operation, for what they did to the Odyssey fleet." I picked up my coffee. 99.8%. Priya said nothing. "Somewhere in a Keth administrative system," I said, "there is a file with 40,000 people in it, and that file is closed, and the rating is 99.8%, and nobody at the Keth Dominion has thought about it since the day they filed it." I drank my coffee. The 0.2%. That is us. That is what is left of us out here in this field, and I want that file reopened." A long silence. Daco stood up, brushing off his knees. "I will need a full materials list and at least 3 months before I can tell you whether the emitter is buildable. The Keth components are the variable. We do not have them yet." "We will get them," I said. He looked at me with an expression I could not entirely read. "You have not asked whether this is possible." "Is it?" He picked up his tool bag. "I have no idea," he said, "but I have never let that stop me before." That was how it started. 3 people in a cargo bay, a box that should not exist, and a plan that had no business working. We flew to Iceland that same night. The depot was exactly as I remembered it. 3 containers, gray and rusted, sitting on a flat stretch of ground with the wind coming off the water in long, cold waves. No lights, no surveillance, no sign that anyone had been here in years. Daco walked the perimeter once, kicked one of the containers, listened to the sound it made, and said, "Good acoustics. Nobody will hear the welding." Priya stood at the door of the largest container and looked out at the dark water. "What are we calling it?" she said. "The ship." "We do not have a ship yet," I said. "We will. What are we calling it?" I thought about it. "The unclassified," I said. Nobody argued. We went inside and started working. The first 3 weeks were the worst, not because the work was hard, although it was, not because the resources were thin, although they were. The worst part was the shape of the problem. Building a resonance emitter from salvaged human components and theoretical Keth schematics is like trying to build a radio from a description of music. You know what the output is supposed to sound like. You have no reliable idea how to make the machine that produces it. Daco did not sleep more than 4 hours in any given 24. I found him once at 3 in the morning sitting on the floor of the container with component diagrams spread around him in a circle, rotating them slowly, staring at them the way you stare at a word you have read so many times it stops looking like a word. I put a coffee next to him and went back to bed. By week 4, he had a working prototype of the emitter housing. It was not beautiful. It looked like something that had fallen off a larger, more dignified piece of equipment, and then been bolted to other things that had suffered similar fates. But Daco ran a frequency test through it, and the output matched the Keth schematics at 91% accuracy. "Not good enough," he said. "What do you need?" "A Keth resonance coupling, the component that translates the frequency signal from our power source into their system's language. Without it, we are broadcasting noise at them." "Where do we get one?" He looked at me. I looked at him. "There is a Keth patrol route," Priya said from across the container, not looking up from her screen. "Sector 12. Single vessel, standard sweep pattern, crew of 40. They pass within range of the depot's long-range scanner every 9 days." The container was quiet for a moment. "3 people," Daco said. "3 people," I agreed. "Against 40. "We do not need to fight 40, I said. "We need to get on board, get to the engineering bay, take one component and leave before anyone understands what happened." Another silence. "I need 4 days to modify the Gertrude's docking clamps," Daco said. "You have 3, I said. "They come through in 6 days." He picked up his tools. Priya finally looked up from her screen. "For what it is worth," she said, "the Keth patrol vessels log all boarding events as probable sensor malfunctions when the intruder mass is below a certain threshold." She paused. 3 humans in light suits are below that threshold." I looked at her. "They will not know we were there," she said. "Not officially. Their own systems will tell them it was a ghost reading." "You got that from the black box," I said. "I got everything from the black box," she said. "That is the thing about keeping perfect records. It is very useful for whoever finds them." 3 days later, Daco finished the docking clamps. 1 day after that, the Keth patrol vessel came through Sector 12 on its standard sweep, and the Gertrude drifted up alongside it in the dark, quiet as a held breath. We went in. What happened inside took 22 minutes and left all three of us with stories we would not tell in detail for several years. But we got the coupling. We got out. The Keth vessel logged the event as a sensor anomaly and continued its sweep. Back in the depot, Daco installed the coupling at 4 in the morning, ran a full frequency test, and looked up from his work with an expression I had never seen on his face before. "It works," he said. He said it like he was surprised, like some part of him had not believed it would actually work even while he was building it. The emitter sang at the exact frequency written in the Keth log file. Perfect, clean, unambiguous. Priya stood up from her station and put her hands flat on the work table and did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "We are going to need a ship to put this in." "I know," I said. We looked at the Gertrude. She was objectively a terrible choice. She was old, badly maintained, and held together by a combination of replacement parts and the sheer refusal of her power core to give up. Her hull plating had been patched in 7 places. Her nav system ran on software that had not been updated in 6 years. But she had never let me down. I walked over and put one hand on her hull. "She needs modifications," Daco said, already circling her with his scanner. "The emitter mount will go on the ventral hull. We will reinforce the forward frame to handle the output resonance. The power draw is going to be significant. She may lose non-essential systems during the broadcast." "Which systems?" He thought about it. "Lighting, heat, possibly life support for a short window." "How short?" "Probably fine," he said. Probably fine was Daco's version of a guarantee. In 8 months of working with him, I had learned that it was actually quite reliable. We started modifying the Gertrude the next morning. She held up better than expected, which was the story of her entire existence. The emitter mount went on the ventral hull in a week. The power redistribution took 2 more. By the end of the 2nd month, she looked nothing like a salvage rig, and everything like a thing that had decided it was done being overlooked. On the night we finished, the 3 of us sat outside the container on the cold ground and looked at her in the darkness. "She needs a name," Priya said. "She has a name," I said. "Not Gertrude," Priya said. "The mission. What do we call what we are doing?" I thought about the Keth log file, the closed file, the satisfied column. "We are the unclassified," I said. "The ship is the unclassified. The mission is the unclassified." I looked at the sky. "They put us in a box. We are going to show them the box does not fit." Nobody said anything after that for a while. The wind came off the water in long cold waves. Above us, somewhere past the clouds, the Keth Dominion sat in its 4,000-year certainty, and its files were closed and its ratings were satisfied. We went to bed. In the morning, we started planning the approach to the Dominion's central command relay, and we did not look up from the work for a very long time. The first time I fired the Gertrude's modified engines at full output, she shook so hard that 2 ceiling panels fell off and a coffee mug slid off the console and shattered on the floor. Daco looked at the ceiling. He looked at the floor. He looked at me. "She is enthusiastic," I said. He picked up a ceiling panel, examined it, and set it against the wall. "I will weld those back on," he said. "After the test," I said. "After the test," he agreed. The test run was over the North Atlantic, low enough that we would look like a routine freight shuttle on any radar that bothered to notice us. The modified engines pushed the Gertrude to speeds she had no engineering right to achieve, and she complained about it loudly in the way old vessels complain about being asked to be more than they were built to be, which is to say with a great deal of noise and vibration, and the occasional alarming smell from the port coupling. But she held. Priya sat at the navigation station Daco had rebuilt from the original Keth schematics, and 6 months of arguments with physics. The interface had been designed for a creature with 4 hands. Daco's solution involved a repurposed gear assembly from a bicycle, 2 joystick controllers from a commercial flight simulator, and a custom software layer that Priya had written herself and that she refused to let anyone else touch. It worked better than the original Keth system, by a margin that Priya refused to calculate, because she said the number would only make Dako's ego worse. Navigation is stable, she said. Tracking confirms we are invisible to all standard scan arrays. We are reading as debris. Debris, I said, good. A fairly large piece of debris, she said, but debris. We brought her around over the Atlantic one more time and Dako ran the emitter through a low-power cycle. The Gertrude hummed, not the grinding, protesting hum of a machine being pushed past its limits. A different hum, lower, more settled, like something that had found the frequency it was always supposed to be running at. Then, 17 seconds into the emitter cycle, something happened that none of us had planned for. A response signal came back. Priya's hands went still on the controls. Dako looked up from his readout panel. I looked at the screen. The Keth frequency monitoring system had flagged our test emission and sent an automated diagnostic response. The response was brief. It ran the standard malfunction assessment protocol and returned a classification. Sensor anomaly. Origin unregistered debris field. Threat assessment negligible. Logging as calibration noise. 7 seconds of silence in the cabin. Then Dako said, "They heard us and filed us as a malfunction." "Yes," I said. "Their own protocol dismissed us." "Yes," I said. He sat back in his seat. Something moved across his face that I could not name. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something older than both of those things. "Then we are ready," he said. We were not ready. We needed 3 more weeks. The emitter output needed calibration at high power levels. We could not test over Earth without risking detection. Priya needed to finish mapping the Keth relay station's internal architecture, which she was doing from the black box data, and from intercepts she was pulling off the Keth patrol frequency in a way that was technically illegal under the containment protocols, and that she described, when I asked, as aggressive research. Dako rebuilt the port coupling twice. The second rebuild took 4 days and involved language that I will not repeat and that Priya noted, without looking up from her screen, was impressively creative. I ran approach simulations, 87 of them. In 61 of those simulations, we reached the relay station undetected. In 26, we were flagged at various points in the approach corridor. The reason we were flagged in those 26 simulations was never the ship. It was never the frequency. It was always the same thing. We moved like a crewed vessel. We made the small corrections and adjustments that a living crew makes, and the Keth automated defense grid, which was very good at its job, noticed the pattern. "We need to drift," I said. "Drift," Priya said. "We cannot fly like we have a destination. We have to move the way debris moves. Passive, irregular. Let the Gertrude coast where her mass takes her and only correct when we are about to go off course." I looked at the simulation results. We have to convince their systems that we are not trying to go anywhere. "While flying directly to their most defended installation," Dako said. "Yes. That sounds very relaxing," he said. It was not relaxing. The approach corridor to the Keth Central Command Relay took 11 hours at drift speed, and for 11 hours we sat in the dark with minimal power running and the Gertrude doing her best impression of a large piece of old metal going nowhere in particular. No active sensors. No powered navigation. Priya watched the passive readings and made pencil marks on a physical chart because any digital signal, even internal, carried a risk. Pencil on paper, in a modified salvage rig, drifting through the most heavily defended piece of Keth space in the quadrant. Dako spent 9 of those 11 hours lying on the cargo bay floor doing something with a small electronic component that he said was fine-tuning, and that looked to me like a person who could not stop moving their hands. He had been like that since Iceland, always working, always touching something, adjusting something, building something. I understood it. I did not say so. In the 10th hour, Priya held up one finger. We all stopped breathing. On the passive scanner, 2 Keth patrol vessels were running a sweep pattern 2,000 kilometers off our port side. They were running active scans, the kind that painted everything in their range with a thorough, detailed reading. The Gertrude drifted. Her mass read as debris, her power signature read as trace residual. Her thermal output was cold from 10 hours of minimal running. The sweep hit us. The Keth Patrol logged the reading. Sensor return unregistered debris. Mass consistent with salvage material. Threat assessment none. Continue sweep. They passed. Priya exhaled one long breath through her nose and made another pencil mark on her chart. Daco set down the component he had been working on and stared at the ceiling. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say that the silence was not already saying better. In the 11th hour, the relay station appeared on passive scan. It was enormous, not in the way that human stations are enormous, which is to say large in comparison to the things around them. It was enormous the way a mountain is enormous, the kind of size that changes the scale of everything near it. It sat at the center of a web of signal arrays that stretched in every direction, and at its core, broadcasting the Keth Dominion's unified command frequency to every military vessel in the third expansion corridor, was the relay transmitter. That was our target. Not to destroy it. To use it. I looked at Daco, he nodded. I looked at Priya. She had already begun the sequence on the emitter control panel. I powered the Gertrude's engines up from minimal to operational, slow, smooth. The power draw was significant, the lights in the cabin dimmed, the heating system cut out, the air cycled down to reserves. The emitter came online with a sound I had never heard before, not the hum from the test run. Something deeper, something that seemed to come from the structure of the ship itself, like the Gertrude had found one true note she had been carrying inside her hull for her entire life and was finally being asked to sing it. I set the broadcast parameters. Target, Keth Relay Transmitter Array. Frequency, the one from the log file, the one from the black box. Output maximum. Signal type, Keth Command Layer Shutdown Protocol, inverted and amplified. Not a weapon. A key. A key that would tell every Keth military system within range that it had received an authorized shutdown command from its own network, using its own language, in its own voice. Priya said, ready. Daco said, ready. I looked at the relay station through the forward window. It was massive and calm and completely certain that nothing in this part of space could threaten it. Broadcast, I said. The Gertrude sang. The emitter output hit the relay array, and the array did what it was designed to do, because it was a very good piece of engineering that had worked perfectly for 4,000 years. It received the signal. It authenticated it using its own internal protocols. It distributed it across every connected system in range. And every Keth weapon system in the third expansion corridor powered down. Not with an explosion, not with a crash. They simply went quiet. Lights still on, crew unharmed, ships intact. Guns off. The Keth Command Network registered the event and sent out an automated status query. The query received no response from the weapons systems because the weapons systems were now very politely declining to operate. The network sent another query, then another. Then something happened that had not happened in 4,000 years of Keth administrative history. The classification system received a status report it could not file. The system searched its taxonomy for the appropriate category. There was no category for this. The system returned one line. Error, reclassification required. I looked at that line on Priya's screen for one long moment. Then I opened a broadcast channel, every frequency I had, Earth relay satellites, colonial ship transponders, every human signal in range. And the Keth open channel. Daco looked at me. Priya looked at me. I had not told them I was going to do this. I had not planned it exactly. But the words were there, already formed, the way things that have been sitting inside you for 5 years tend to be there when you finally need them. I thought about the log file, the closed file, the satisfied column. I broadcast the Keth's own efficiency report back at them. The entry for the Odyssey operation, the timestamp, the clearance time, the rating. Estimated clearance time, 11.3 minutes. Actual, 11.1 minutes. Efficiency rating, 99.8%. Then I said, "Hi, we're the 0.2%. You have our frequency, we have yours." A pause. ESV unclassified, crew of 3. I closed the channel. The cabin was completely silent. The Gertrude drifted in the dark, her emitter cooling, her hull still carrying the faint vibration of the note she had sung. Daco sat very still. Priya looked at the error message on her screen. Error, reclassification required. "We should leave," Daco said. "Yes," I said. I pushed the engines to full and turned the Gertrude around and we ran. We did not sleep for 31 hours. The return route took us through the outer edge of the debris field, the long way, the way that kept us off every patrol corridor in the quadrant. Priya watched the scanner. Daco monitored the emitter for residual output. I flew. Nobody spoke much. When we finally crossed back into what the containment protocols technically defined as human space, Priya leaned back in her seat and looked at the ceiling and said, "They are going to have a great deal of paperwork." Daco made a sound that might have been a laugh. I kept my eyes on the forward window. We landed the Gertrude back at the Reykjavik depot 12 hours later, and we had barely cleared the airlock when the first government contact signal came through. Not a request, a demand. The kind of signal that has legal language in it and uses words like immediately and unauthorized and significant concern. 3 more followed in the next hour. Then a dozen. Then they stopped categorizing them as contact signals and started categorizing them as something the incoming system could only label as urgent, which meant the people sending them had run out of bureaucratic language for what they were feeling. I sat down on the floor of the depot and drank cold coffee and read through the messages. Daco sat across from me and worked on a small component with a screwdriver, which was how I knew he was processing things. Priya stood at the door of the container and looked out at the water. "They are furious," I said. "Yes," she said. "They think we started a war." "We may have," she said, "or we may have ended one before it became something worse." She paused. "That is the thing about the Keth. They do not go to war with things they are afraid of. They classify threats and they contain them and they wait for the threats to stop being threats on their own." She turned from the door. "We have not started a war. We have made ourselves unclassifiable. That is a different thing." "How is it different?" Daco asked. "Because they know how to fight a war," she said. "They do not know how to fight something that does not fit in their system." 3 days later, the first non-Keth contact came in. It was not from Earth. It was not from any human source. It was a signal on a frequency we had never seen before, structured in a pattern that was clearly deliberate and clearly not Keth. Priya spent 6 hours with it before she looked up from her screen with an expression that made both of us stop what we were doing. "It is a greeting," she said. "From who?" I said. "From something that has been watching," she said slowly. "Something that has been under the Keth for a very long time." She looked at the screen, then at us. "Something that has been waiting for someone else to go first." The depot was quiet for a moment. "How many signals?" Daco asked. Priya checked her screen. Her expression did not change, but something in her posture shifted, the way a person shifts when a number is larger than they expected. "So far," she said, 7. 7 species, 7 signals, all arriving within 72 hours of the broadcast. They had all heard us. They had all been listening, on frequencies we had never thought to scan, in directions we had never thought to look, waiting. The way people wait when they have been told for a long time that waiting is the only option. The Keth issued their formal response on the 4th day. It was not a declaration of war. It was not a threat. It was a reclassification notice. Humanity's status in the Keth administrative system had been updated. Class 9 biological nuisance had been removed. The new classification had been debated by the Keth Council for 4 days, which was unprecedented in their history. Their taxonomy had no existing category. They had built a new one. Priya translated it carefully, checking her work 3 times. The new classification read, in the most accurate translation she could manage, as unresolved. Not a threat, not a nuisance, not a species, not an ally. Unresolved. I sat with that word for a while. Unresolved, Daco said. He tested the word the way he tested a component, turning it over, checking its weight. That means they do not know what to do with us. It means we are the first thing in 4,000 years that their system could not file, Priya said. It means they are paying attention, I said. The government communications had been escalating steadily since day 1. By day 5, they had moved past demands into something that looked more like negotiation, which meant they had figured out that the 3 of us were not going to respond to demands. The containment protocols were formally under review. 2 colonial governments had publicly stated they were no longer willing to enforce them. On day 6, Daco started building again. Not modifications, not repairs, something new from the ground up. I watched him lay out materials on the depot floor in careful rows, and I recognized the pattern. It was a structural frame, the beginning of something large. "What are you building?" I said. He did not look up from his work. "A ship," he said. "We have a ship." "A second ship," he said. "The Gertrude is one ship, and one ship is a statement." He set down a strut and picked up another. 2 ships is the beginning of something. I watched him work. "What will you call it?" I said. He was quiet for a moment. His hands kept moving. "Odyssey III," he said. He said it the way you say a thing that you have been carrying a long time and have finally decided to put down somewhere permanent. Priya, across the container, did not look up from her screen, but she reached over and turned up the volume on the signal receiver, and the 7 voices from 7 species that had been waiting for someone to go first filled the room in 7 different frequencies, all at once. I went outside. The wind was coming off the water the way it always did, cold and long and without any particular interest in my feelings about it. The sky was clear. The stars were out. Somewhere past the visible edge of things, the Keth Dominion was sitting with its first error message in 4,000 years and trying to build a new category for us. I thought about the debris field. I should go back, I thought. There are still pieces to catalog. 17,431 is not a complete number. I know it is not complete because I have never once believed it was complete. But I did not go back, not yet. I went to the scanner bay instead, the small room at the back of the depot where Priya had set up the long-range array. I sat down in the operator's chair. I ran a passive scan on the frequencies Priya had flagged from the 7 signals. The 7 voices were still there, still broadcasting, still waiting. I expanded the scan. At the very outer edge of the array's range, on a frequency we had not been looking at, on a bearing that pointed toward a part of space that no human survey had ever reached, I found something. Not a Keth signal. Not one of the 7. Something older. Something that had been transmitting for a very long time, on a frequency so low and so steady that our scanners had always read it as background noise, as the universe just talking to itself the way it always does. It was not background noise. It was structured, patient, a signal so long and so consistent that it had simply been waiting for a receiver sophisticated enough to recognize it as a signal at all. I sat back in the chair. I thought about the black box sitting in the storage locker of the Gertrude. I thought about the 11 hours of drift through Keth space with pencil marks on a chart. I thought about Daco on the cargo bay floor with his hands that would not stop moving, and Priya at the door looking at the water, and the efficiency rating on the Keth log file. 99.8%. The 0.2%. I pulled up the signal parameters and started running an analysis. Behind me, through the depot wall, I could hear Daco working. The clean sound of someone building something new from the beginning. The sound that humanity makes when it has been given a reason to start again. Above me, the stars were out. I reached for the signal,